Hello and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who, as the last of his line, is duly sworn to free the world from the menace that is Dracula.
Tim Longo Belmont.
Last of the Longos. Tim Longo Belmont.
Or maybe it's Tim Belmont Longo. Yeah.
Could well be.
The family that saves the world every 100 years from the Dracula that I guess you just can't stop the 100-year cycle.
It's just not very good. They can't bring it home.
Yeah.
Something holds them back every time.
Or the franchise would die. So
that's
something's got to happen.
Yeah.
Super Castlevania IV is what we're talking about. 1991.
Yeah, an interesting year. You were kind of telling me some of the games beforehand. We've talked about the year before, of course, because we played Link to the Past and Super Mario World on the cast, and this is another from that year. But there were quite a number of other ones this year that were interesting. You want to go ahead and rattle some of those off?
Yeah, you have Sonic the Hedgehog that came out this year. Final Fantasy IV, which I believe in North America was 2. You have Civilization 1, Mega Man 4, Monkey Island 2, Metroid 2, Return of Samus, which was the Game Boy version. And then, obviously, notably, Street Fighter 2, which was obviously enormous influence on gaming. We have yet to play a fighting game. Another World. You said you'd played that recently, huh?
I played it a bit when it was on the iPad. I did not finish it. It's quite difficult, and I'm not sure it's the best place for it.
Yeah, it seems like a weird place for it.
Yeah, it's a very strange. I don't remember the control scheme exactly, but I do remember thinking, this is maybe not the best way to play this. Maybe I'll come back to it later. Another one from 91 I'm seeing is Super Ghouls and Ghosts, which is definitely in the same lane. As this game.
Yeah, definitely familiar. Yeah, it felt familiar. Yeah. For those who don't know, there was an original Neverwinter Nights game before the one that BioWare did. That was one of the first graphical MMORPGs. Done by Stormfront. So that came out this year too. Road Rash, maybe I mentioned. Tecmo Bowl, I didn't mention. Yeah, so pretty, a lot of heavy hitters. Would this be our third Konami game that we've played? Because is Silent Hills Konami, right?
Yes, I think it is.
And then Metal Gear, yeah. So this is sort of like those. That's the three big Konami games, franchises, really. I feel like. Yeah,
at the time you'd also would have had like Contra, I guess would be a big one.
They just announced a new Contra, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I missed that. What, at E3?
Yeah, I think it's new. It's forgetting the name of it. Rogue Ops, I think.
I thought they were out of the whole thing. But yeah, I think that those. I mean, they were. I've kind of forgotten it was Konami. They were an arcade developer, so that's probably a good way to kind of get our way in. But they did Frogger, and things like that back in the time.
Yeah, right.
So, that was kind of how they got their start, and so I'm sure that a lot of their sort of internal, sort of strategy was, or just knowledge was, was with the arcade games. I was trying to look for whether they had another big one, but I can't.
Yeah, I was just skimming a little bit too, to see what else. I'm not finding it quickly, though.
No, although they did do those sort of X-Men, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles styles of games as well. They were pretty well known for it at the time, I think, too. But again, sort of arcadey games, and that was kind of the thing that maybe took me that I guess I was most surprised about. Because and we got a letter about this, and we talked about it via text, because we were talking about, you had introduced it as like the other half of Metroidvania on the show last week. But this one doesn't have any of those elements, and it's much more of a straightforward, platformer combat game with a lot of arcade elements. It's a score attack game in some sense, although I don't think you necessarily play it that way unless you've got it at home and you're playing it a lot. But it's got lives, right? And it's got resources, and it's got sort of very location-based checkpointing that I think of feeling kind of arcadey, just because of limitations, that you're not going to save anywhere and restore to every screen or whatever. So you kind of go back to not too generous checkpoints, which is another way to squeeze quarters. Yeah, right. And the timer, that was the other element.
Yeah. Pro, just really quick back on the Konami, Pro Evo is one of their, soccer, and then Dance Dance Revolution is obviously a huge arcade game, etc. for them too. So those are maybe some of the other notable ones that we haven't, that we haven't talked about. Yeah, it's much more arcadey, much more action than I realize, and I think it is funny that I guess I just assumed, because of Metroid's timing and release dates, that they were sort of trading back and forth with that sort of subgenre, and thus that's where the name came from. But being sort of Castlevania noobs, the both of us, you were saying that you had found out that Symphony of the Night, which is that PS1?
That's a PS1 title, yeah. That's the one. That's the one where they really, I knew that one was, and all the subsequent ones, the 2D ones, at least on like the Game Boy Advance, and I think the DS had some as well. They always had those weird, after Symphony of the Night, basically all the ones that have music in the title, like Rondo of Blood and etc., are all what we think of as the more Metroidvania formula. So these earlier games, though, definitely feel like just adapting arcade mechanics to the home console, which is very common at the time. I mean, a lot of these elements we were talking pre-show are also present in Super Mario World. Scores and timers and levels and all of that. Although they do have here a password mechanic, so that you can, after you finish a level, you can get the password to start from that stage. So you at least have that. So you can start a new game with lives just from wherever you last got to, and have all new lives. So that's kind of useful as well. And that's kind of feels like a sop to the fact that you're playing at home. No, I'm curious to know to what degree I'll be leaning on that. It didn't take me too long to get through this section. I wonder how it was for you.
Yeah, it was fine. I am playing on the Switch, so I definitely use the save feature occasionally, I will admit, when I, had a particularly good run. But I did accept the deaths that I, and the checkpoints. The checkpoints were more generous than I thought they were going to be honest. I figured once you lost all your lives, that you would go all the way back to the beginning, but in some cases you don't. Oh,
that's true. Yeah, I think you go to the beginning of the current stage.
Yeah, right.
If you lose your last life, yeah, that's true. That is another kind of nod to the fact that you're at home and not plugging quarters in.
Yeah, so that was nicely forgiving in that regard. But yeah, it definitely didn't take too long. These early levels, definitely it's like any kinds of these kinds of games. It always takes me a little while to get into the groove of like how everything works and how the particular character physics work or tuning, etc. The way that it's coded. Definitely doesn't feel Mario, but I think, as Brett said in pre-show, which I think is a good point, they probably intentionally wanted Simon to feel heavier and different,
Yeah.
And that's my memory of Contra and things like that, right? That was kind of a bit of Konami's thing, is they were sort of these semi, humanist or realistic and humanoid kind of characters versus the cartooniness, So there was some competition going on there, and that kind of carries over to the original Metal Gear, if you remember too, right? Which was very much like trying to simulate this military action kind of, adventure game. Really quick to go, I just wanted to mention, because they're doing a little bit of reading before the cast, talking about Castlevania 1, 2, and 3, something that I did not know, because I didn't play those, of course, either. The first one was very similar to this particular game, and in fact, the director of Super Castlevania IV said that it was a bit of a remake of the original to him. In Castlevania 2, they had RPG elements, and you would actually talk to NPCs and gain clues. And so kind of following a little bit of the Zelda model, where they kind of were experimenting, after the originals.
Yeah.
And then in Castlevania 3, they took out the RPG elements, but they made it non-linear. And in that you could, I think, select different stages, and you had these sort of different companions, 3 different companions that you could take with you. So I was reading that, I was like, wow, this, even up to this point, they had been doing quite a bit of experimenting versus, say, Metroid, from a formula perspective, from the beginning, had always had the Metroid formula, and they would expand upon it from Metroid 1 and Super Metroid and the Game Boy Metroid, but like that much experimentation wasn't really happening. So it's interesting that the past ones had dabbled in so much. So in a way, the one we're playing is a bit of return to form,
Yeah, interesting.
In that kind of traditional combo of platforming, combat action, and side-scrolling, enemy encounters, which it's fun to play that combination of different things for me. Haven't done that in a while.
Yeah, no, me either. I mean, that's definitely not the sort of thing I really play anymore. It definitely, I kept commenting when I did ultimately stream this, just like, oh wow, this is pretty old school. Like, and I haven't played something this old school in a long time, so it's kind of neat. There's definitely good fun to have there. It's there's something to be said for the kind of simplicity of it. It's not a complicated game. But there is, they're throwing lots of wrinkles at you too. So you're having to learn the stages, or at least I feel like you learn lots of different skills along the way, knowing when to duck, and, how close you need to get to something to be able to use your whip, and the sort of timing against the sinusoidal movements of different, creatures, which is very common. It happens with a number of the different sort of critters. So there's like lots of little skills you can pick up, which I think is pretty interesting. In some cases, it took me encountering something multiple times before I realized, oh, that's how I'm supposed to deal with this. There were these plants that drop from the ceiling, and you can actually whip up and get them as they're falling. But the first couple you don't have to, because they're so high up. You can just walk by, and in the time it takes them to fall, you could just back attack them, crouch and hit them on the ground. Whereas the last one is very close, so you have to know that you can actually whip up and get it before it hits you, because you can't get past it fast enough. So there's little interesting things like that I think it's teaching you too, of like how the timing of things work. It feels like they're teaching in these couple of levels a lot of basic skills that should serve you in good stead for the rest of the game. When I assume the challenges will be more difficult.
Yeah, for sure. One of the other things that we probably talked about when it comes to the level design, when we played probably maybe more Mario, although now I'm thinking about it, we probably didn't do too much of that. With the mode, well, you'll have to correct me on this, but with the mode 7 stuff and the 16-bit graphics, they use the layers of the world in pretty cool ways. Even in like the first level, they have that sort of gate or the fence that comes up,
right? The transparent,
and then you can go behind it, and there's sort of 2 planes, and so you're kind of exploring. It's, even though it's a side-scrolling 2-dimensional game, you're exploring with some depth. And then the other thing that I really have appreciated is even just something as simple as going upstairs, and the fact that you can walk by the stairs, or you can walk by and go diagonally up, and then he'll climb the stairs, and then if you jump down, you can jump off of the platform down to the lower level. So there's a good amount of, and Mario did some of that, but there's a good amount of sort of sense of space, in a sort of a layered way, which gives you a lot more options to kind of fool around with that platforming as well, which is kind of nice.
Yeah,
I didn't anticipate that, and I think that's part of the Mode 7 technology, right? That allows you to do some of that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't brush up on my Mode 7 because we talked about it back then. But that's definitely what they're doing in Super Metroid as well. Though they're not doing as much of the sort of poking through the layers that they're doing here. I'd have to sort of probably read about that a little bit and figure out how exactly they might have been doing that. I don't know if that's purely like transparency, maybe a 1-bit alpha style. I'm not sure, actually.
It was definitely a shocking kind of surprise moment for me. Really.
It is really cool, and I think it immediately shows off the hardware and things like that, because this is still fairly early in the cycle, right? I don't remember exactly when the SNES came out, but this feels like the beginning, right?
This was first year, yeah.
First year, okay, yeah. That's what I thought. So, yeah, I mean, it's just... here's a cool thing you can do with this.
This was this team's first 16-bit game, too, so
yeah.
They were experimenting. Sorry about the lawn work. I don't know if you can hear that.
I occasionally get that. I've got kids running around outside too, so you might hear something here on occasion.
Apologize.
We're recording at a weird time this week because I am hopping in a car and driving a long way tomorrow. So I've got to get everything done tonight.
Oh boy, it's getting louder.
Yep, sure is. Okay.
Hypothetically, they will pass by when they progress. The other cool thing that was very surprising to me was the whip itself. I had always known that Simon had a whip, and the franchise was known for that whip, and kind of like that was one of its shticks. And reading back about the first 3 on the NES, obviously they had limitations there. But with this one, they started really expanding into what it could do in a few different ways, which was pretty neat. Not only do you have sort of full, 8 directions basically of attacks based on where you're pressing your your D-pad or your stick. There's a press and hold mode that kind of allows it to sort of go limp, and you can flail it about or something.
Yeah.
And then it also is used as a traversal mechanic, which I don't believe was in the previous one. So you can use it sort of Bionic Commando style on these hard points and swing across gaps and stuff. Indiana Jones style, rather, maybe is a better example.
Right.
And so that adds to the platforming. So it becomes quite a cool utility tool in a few different ways. And then, of course, you can upgrade it from a regular whip to a chain whip by revealing certain power-ups from hidden candles and things like that. So it's a pretty cool weapon that I'm pretty impressed with so far.
Yeah, I was. I thought it was pretty neat how they, because it's so kind of cool and different. I feel like that initial area where there's really not a lot of danger, in theory, there's just like the candles that you can whip, and I think that even they're teaching you, like, it's a good time to sort of teach you that you can hit those things and that there's things behind them, which I guess is probably also mentioned in the manual, but I didn't. I actually played a little bit and then was like, oh yeah, I never read the manual because I always forget that you had to back then. And I went back and read. I was like, oh yeah, okay, I already figured that out. But I guess I missed what the hearts did. So we'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff going on there. I mean, the fact that the thing will dangle like that makes it feel a lot like a real-ish whip. It makes you feel like, when you are throwing that thing out, because it puts a weight on the end as well. When you're in chain mode, that's a little heavier on the end. So it feels really good. I mean, it just feels really good as a whip. It feels like you're throwing it out there, like you're cracking it, I guess. you're snapping it out there to get at things. And it talks about in the manual how it does less damage if it's dangling, because of course you'd rather hit something hard, right? And throw it at it. So
okay.
yeah, it mentions that too. And of course the powered up whip versus the leather whip or whatever. It's kind of orange, so I'm not sure what. I assume it's supposed to be leather.
Yeah, probably.
But it's super neat when it's now a chain, which happens right away, right? I mean, they're not hiding any of this stuff from you. They want you to do that. They want you to find the chain and have the cool factor. And I feel like all of these are just little good teaching moments that games of this era could do pretty well. Because they're a little simpler, they actually can take the space to instruct the player in those skills, like I said, that I think we're going to have to lean on pretty heavily as the game goes on.
Yeah. The level design so far I've been impressed with too. I mean, it's definitely of that era, but I think that they're doing some interesting things with it. And I think it combined with what I'm also fairly happily surprised by is the enemy design. There's quite a bit of variety, and tonally, the enemy design probably was a great, fun novelty of the time, right? Especially when sort of one of the dominant, obviously, sets of games that you're going to be playing is coming from Nintendo themselves, which all have a certain tone to it. And here, you have that kind of gothic horror kind of feel, and there's a lot of fun stuff going on, zombie arms coming up from the ground that grab your legs,
right?
A lot of interesting creative stuff there that, from a mechanic standpoint, fairly simple, but you mentioned Ghouls and Ghosts, is another example of that. And I think it's just each enemy that they introduce has a nice little trick to it that's kind of fun. And I've always heard over the years the sort of infamous Medusa heads,
yes.
And finally experiencing those, they're oh my goodness, they remind me of, there was an enemy in Pitfall 2 back on the 2600, which was one of my nostalgically one of my favorite games of all time, and these condors did the same thing, where they just had that sort of, like you said, that
quick sway, sinusoidal.
Yeah.
Or it may not be. It feels sinusoidal, but it's probably not. I mean, it's probably an approximation, but it's close. Yeah,
they're just irritating enough to mess with you, and they just, that kind of enemy design always makes you second guess what to do and when to do it, and then you just kind of get hit accidentally often. So. Yeah. I know people have been cursing those for years, so now I know why.
Yep. It's really good. I mean, and there's also that let's see, other enemy design stuff. The one that constantly foiled me was like I don't know if it's a crow or a magpie or just some kind of bird that sort of follows you a little bit more intelligently. It sort of swoops down. A little differently, and that one could be very tricky because it kind of just, once it gets near you, it kind of dive bombs and goes straight at you, and that can be hard to get to, because of where it's coming from. So that one's good too. Yeah,
that's a good example of the ramping up that you were talking about from a difficulty standpoint, because it's usually it's using a similar paradigms to the bat, but the bat just sort of flies straight at you, and you have a very simple, window of opportunity there. And then they use similar mechanics with the crow, but then the crow has some sort of, feints or some faking you out, and then a little bit extra behavior. So you can see them slowly building upon sort of basic structures of enemies, and then there's kind of adding a +1 or a +2 something to it and then changing the art and the animation, and then it kind of mixes it up quite nicely. So it's going to be fun to see how they ramp that up over time. And maybe we can talk about the bosses over time. I don't know if you want to hit any of that, how specific we want to get here.
I mean, we can talk. There's no harm in talking about them. I mean, one is it's, I don't know, Death on His Pale Horse, I guess. I don't remember what his name was in the manual. I don't know if you have that open.
Did they have him in the manual?
He was in the manual. Actually, quite a number were in the manual.
Cool.
so you actually see all the cool stuff you're going to see. Which is not something I feel like we would do these days, but maybe it was a sales technique, because maybe you were able to see the manual in the store or something like that. I don't know. I don't know how that was meant to be used.
Are there descriptions that, like, do they talk about the enemies?
I think they just give their names. So I don't. I'll look again here in a sec, but no, I don't think so. And he has a name. I already forgot it. It wasn't something obvious, but it does start with an R, so I think that's why I'm thinking Reaper. And I like how he's got this, skeletal horse, and the head itself is its attack. The head's basically a whip to a certain degree, and it was an interesting fight. He's kind of relentless, and then it's like a lot of bosses, it's multi-phase, and this, once you've taken down the horse kind of crumbles, the bones go all over the place, and the rider starts jumping, and kind of pummeling down at you from the sky, jumps pretty high and kind of like shoots down into the ground. So you have a lot of sort of different types of movement that, first you're trying to evade back and forth and get in close enough to hit this horse, and now you're basically trying to wait until the thing's gonna come down at you, and then quickly move out of the way and face back at it to hit it. So there's definitely a lot of patterns going on, which definitely makes me think of other Contra series, especially Contra. So yeah, a lot of sort of interest already in that first boss fight that feels very much of their sort of lineage, to me.
Well, and I think I believe the attack that the horse had was similar fireballs that came out of those stationary skeletal.
Oh yes, that's right. You're right. I might be confusing with something else. Yeah.
So it's
you're right.
So they've taught you a little bit about those fireballs at least up to that point, and then you have this sort of same theme coming out with the skeletal horse, but the head was moving around more. So, but it still was in patterns and things. So I thought that was interesting little touches there where they're reusing / teaching you some of the similar stuff there, which was fun.
Yeah, and the animation's quite good on those characters. You're using, I guess, just a sort of lot of sprites to kind of be the neck pieces of those things, and
Metroid did a lot of that too.
Yeah, Metroid did a lot of that as well. So a common technique of the era, but people would have been seeing it maybe, well, probably the first time in this fidelity, I guess I would say, because I'm sure that sort of thing was present in games before this, but it's sort of to a much more polished level because you've got way more graphics memory than you had on the NES or anything on that prior generation. So I can't remember the first time I saw that sort of technique. I'm sure it was a very long time ago. I don't remember.
No, I'm trying to think too. There's no way I'll remember that now.
Yeah, no, I won't remember that. But yeah, it's pretty neat.
Yeah, and then you have the foreshadowing and the medusa heads in the second level, and then curiously you meet the second boss sort of mid-level or mid-stage.
Yeah. Yep, mid-stage.
And then we forgot to mention that for whatever reason, the boss's health bar is at the top of your screen all the time.
The whole level, yeah.
First stage. So it's sort of, I don't know why that would be. It's so funny.
That is a very strange choice. I mean,
maybe they coded it in there and it's just always up there or something. I don't know. It would have been easy enough to turn it on and off, but I don't know.
You would think so.
Curious. Yeah.
That was very strange.
Maybe it's just sort of foreshadowing or something to remind you you're going to hit it at some point. Because it's not like you can once you engage with the boss, you can't leave and come back. So there's no whittling it down kind of design there. But yeah, once you get to the second boss, sort of mid stage, it's a Gorgon or a Medusa type character.
Yes, it's literally called Medusa in
the manual. Yeah.
In the manual, yeah, and it's Raudane is the rider on the horse.
Okay, I don't know that reference, or if it is one
either. I don't know.
Yeah, and so she fire, she lets little snakes come at you, and then she sort of fires a turning you to stone little sort of effect that you have to dodge as well. She ended up being pretty straightforward if you can take care of the snakes, I feel like, and I got her down pretty quickly. It felt like. I will say, whenever you can keep that. I thought I was going to be so clever and bring that time stopping secondary into the boss battle, but it doesn't seem to work in boss battles. It works outside of levels. I felt like this was probably a game changer, but it probably was just too easy, to
yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, and that's a thing, that's a very common thing across design generally, is that, and I mean, that's, in D&D, the bosses or the harder monsters are harder in part because they're not as vulnerable to exploitative strategies,
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, yeah, it's a balancing thing that you definitely got to use.
You definitely want to feel like, I had to pull out all the stops. I had to figure out what they were actually weak to, or whatever.
Yeah.
Whether that's a JRPG or D&D or some of these, more old school kind of games.
Speaking about the time stopping thing, though, we should hit the secondary equipment.
Tell me about the offhand weapon. I'm not sure what they call them.
I'm just calling it secondary myself.
They call them weapon. in the manual. They call them weapons of choice.
Okay, cool. I love it. Weapons of choice. Yeah. So I mean, we're pretty sure, though we should test this out a little bit, that all of the hidden items that drop from like candles and destructible blocks or whatever, those sorts of things. Enemies sometimes drop stuff. Sometimes they'll drop these secondary weapons, like a glaive, morning star kind of thing that fires out, or an axe, and they all behave differently. Throwing knives, and I mentioned the time stopping one. What am I forgetting?
There's the fire potion, or fire bomb.
Yeah,
and there's a invisibility potion.
Oh, I didn't find that one. Cool.
Yeah, I definitely did. Although I mostly didn't use these because I wasn't. I guess I just did not get as far as what the hearts were for. There are things that allow you to more quickly throw the weapons later. There's ways to power yourself up that way. And there are 1-ups, so now I don't have to worry about that anymore.
What do you mean there's ways to power up your items?
There's a double shot and triple shot that lets you use them more quickly, like use them 2 in a row.
So you get
3 times in a row
later or something?
Yeah, I think that's what's going on. It doesn't really say. It just says allows use of throwing weapon twice in a row.
Huh. All right.
Or thrice 3 times in a row.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So a little bit of progression going on there. That's interesting.
Yep. And then the what look like chicken legs to me are supposedly pork chops.
Yeah, that's actually a fairly infamous story because I feel like every time Castlevania comes up, somebody makes that joke again, where in the manual they describe them as pork chops, but everyone was convinced that they were chicken legs because they do literally look like chicken legs in the game.
Yeah, they much more look like chicken legs than they look like any pork chop I've ever seen. But
but yeah, ironically, the hearts are your ammo for your weapons of choice, not your health, which is weird. Another weird choice. I don't know if they're trying to buck the Nintendo trend or something, because it seems like it would just confuse people of the era more than anything. So yeah, but it is neat.
It confused me. Of this era.
Era, right?
I definitely assumed that I was trying to get those to some number and then get an extra life or something, or maybe just have it heal me. That you get a free heal without having to find a piece of meat in the level. So I definitely did not interpret that properly. I guess I just did not go far enough into the manual. I think I basically got to the bosses and was like, oh, okay, cool. This is where all the bosses are going to be. And they do. They basically show all of them. Pretty wild.
Yeah, I mean it's because the items are discreetly drop off of each of the specific locations or candles or what have you. There's a bit of memorization to the level, which is very very Mario as well. I guess is another good comparison. And so once you find out where that stuff is, you can kind of plan out which secondary weapon you want to bring, and then when one drops, you can kind of make a decision because obviously they override each other. So if you have one that you really like and you want to keep it, then you have to make a little bit of a choice there. So that's kind of cool. And that to Brett's point about arcadiness to it, and then also the era, which is very much like this is a game that a kid might have, in one of their only games, and so they're going to play it over and over and over again. And so really mastering the levels, and memorizing where everything is, and kind of building, having a build, essentially a mini build, if you will, of like, I'm going to go in and use this on the boss this time or what have you. That's kind of unexpected thing in there for me, the secondary ones. I didn't actually look. I missed if the previous ones had the secondary. No, they did actually. Yeah, in fact, Castlevania One, a screenshot from Castlevania One looks almost identical, other than the graphical fidelity. That has the enemy health bar for whatever reason.
Yep.
The secondary has the hearts and the one ups, or the player, or the how many lives you have, time. Yeah.
Well, it makes me think that a big part of what they think their game about is those fights. I mean, they show you all of them in the manual. They want you to know this is where you're headed. This is what maybe it's supposed to be a sense of dread, literally hanging over you, that you're going to have to fight this boss. Maybe, I don't know. It is a curious decision, so, and I have to assume it's on purpose, that it's not it doesn't feel like a limitation for sure. Of the tech or anything like that. It just feels like a deliberate choice. And so I'm just trying to kind of work backwards to why that choice. And that's the only thing I can think is to reinforce your goal here is, at each step of the way, your goal is going to be to fight this boss. And then to have the second one play out as it does a lot earlier also kind of lends itself to that dread, because now it's like, oh, it's not even just that I'm just going to go to the end of the level and fight this thing. It could happen at any time. So there's maybe also a sense of
right,
of fear that you're supposed to have of that the next screen you might come across will have the boss and you will not be prepared, right? You won't have picked up exactly the right dagger or what have you. I mean, granted that only works once, but
yeah, like almost like each stage is almost like the whole stage is about getting to that boss and that boss's stage, if you will. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I mean that kind of happened in the second stage, right? Because she showed up kind of out of the blue. I thought it was, basically I didn't know, right? It felt like a shorter level, and then after you kill her, you just keep going, and so like, wait, am I in the third level now? I didn't get the stage screen, I didn't get the map. And then there is this sense, when you see the map, there is this sense that which I really like, of traversing through the castle or what have you to get to Dracula.
Right.
So there's this kind of this quest is there the whole time, kind of in a similar way to the boss being there throughout the level too.
It's a definite through line, and it reinforces what your goals are here. And also maybe just to keep there's also just the sense of maybe mild panic as you've taken some damage, that your health bar is so much shorter than the opponent's.
That's
so
true.
I think there's a lot of ways it works to the theming or the setting and tone that you were talking about. This sort of gothic horror type of feel. I think it might be intended to contribute to that. Whether or not it works as well in 2019 as it might have in 1991. I do feel like that's maybe a thing there. So
yeah, interesting. I just noticed a little bit the naming in this franchise is just crazy in various ways. A little anecdote you may not know. So the original Japanese titling, I guess I'm going to butcher this, but Akumajo Dracula, which is, I guess, translated to Dracula Satanic Castle. Um, and so in North
I mean,
America,
it ain't wrong.
they were uncomfortable with that, the religious connotations.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say, especially in 1986 or whatever,
Yep,
when we were in the middle of the Satanic Panic here in the States.
yep, totally. Yep, D&D and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and also the stories of kids who were being like literally satanic rituals in like kindergartens, or there was a famous case in California,
Yeah,
where
yeah,
they got these kids to say these things because kids are very suggestible. Anyway,
right. Yeah,
you can go look that one up. That's a whole
the whole thing.
wild story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then another anecdote is apparently the original Castlevania came out on the 90th anniversary of Bram Stoker's Dracula,
Oh,
which is weird and I assume planned. But yeah. Yeah, so it's an interesting historical franchise in various ways. I had always heard that, to be honest, because it has such a sort of. There's been so many of these games, to be honest. I feel like more than many franchises, more than Metal Gear for sure as well.
oh yeah.
From the same company, but the lore. Oh, and there's also, isn't there a Netflix? They did a.
Yes, there's a 2-season animated series on
Yeah.
Netflix.
Written
Castlevania.
by Warren Ellis, I believe, who's a
Yes,
really
that's
famous,
correct.
yeah, comic writer that I love, graphically. Anyway, yeah, what a funny franchise, and they really lean into it. This Dracula stuff, which is fun. But some of the other history, like when the game came out, it was definitely well received and is on greatest games of all time lists all over the place. And when it comes to this, there's been so many of these since this game, but from an influence and lineage and legacy perspective, this is definitely one of the formulaic versions of of this kind of game that people have always looked at. It feels like, and now that we're playing it, I can totally see it. It is a really good one of those. It just tends to be one of the earliest one of those, despite the not having the Metroidvania part of it, which is just still surprising to me, and I didn't realize.
Yeah, this is not even the fourth release of games in this series.
No, if you count the Game Boy ones, yeah.
Well, there's Castlevania, then there's Vampire Killer on the MSX2, then there's Castlevania 2, then there's Haunted Castle, then Castlevania The Adventure Game Boy,
right,
and then Castlevania 3, and then one it looks like was maybe it came here, but this is the Akumajo Special Boku Dracula Kun platformer. Oh, it's like a chibi head style. Weird.
The kid that's in the anniversary. I think it's called.
Oh, it's like one of the ones Kid Dracula. First time it's come to the States.
Okay, in the anniversary version.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then a Castlevania 2 on the Game Boy, and then Super Castlevania 4.
Oh
no, Kid Dracula's a different one. Kid Dracula actually comes out the year after, or a couple years after this game. So yeah, no, I don't know what this special game is. It's considered a parody of the Castlevania series. Wow, that's something. I've never seen that one before, but yeah, there's a lot of them. Oh, holy Mary, it just goes and goes. Yeah. So anyway, it's quite something. It's definitely one of those series that just goes on and on and on, and and evolves in different ways, right? There are 3D ones as well, and then of course there's the more Metroidvania ones, that start with Symphony of the Night. So it's not like it's either a series that didn't evolve and change, because it definitely did. I mean,
yeah,
not all of them are successful, I think. Not all of them quite are as beloved, but they've got games that are on mobile phones. They've got games on all the different consoles, and yeah, it's just a total total different thing.
Well, one of the later modern era ones that was full 3D, I believe, was produced by Kojima as well.
Yes, probably. Was that Lament of Innocence? Maybe.
I don't remember which one it was. Yeah, it was like kind of like a sort. It was. I think it was marketed as a bit of a reboot ish. I don't remember the name of it, but it was third person platinum style kind of that Kojima was involved with somehow. Yeah. So it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun to keep playing for me. I'm really interested to see where it goes. It is nice to be playing on the Switch. I definitely recommend the Anniversary Edition, which is one of the reasons that we're playing it right now. Because it's definitely I'm playing in the 4x3 mode with scan lines on it in the emulation, which is kind of fun. So it
looks as close as it can to
blurry and kind of, so that's kind of fun. I wasn't able to get a SNES Classic in time, so that's where I went.
Yeah, no, totally reasonable, and I'm sure it's pretty faithful. It's I'm sure it's just the game emulated, so I'm sure it's absolutely fine. And with those graphical effects, probably nice to play it that way. But yeah, it's been pretty great. Why don't we take a quick break and then come back for some feedback?
Sounds good.
Welcome back from the break. We are in the sort of feedback part of the episode. We get feedback through two primary ways. One is, maybe three. One is via podcast reviews, which of course help us reach new listeners. The other via email and of course Twitter. But I have a long-standing, for those who are somewhat new to the cast, I have a long-standing promise that if you write a review to the tune of a song, and you tell me what that song is, I will do my best to replicate that.
I forgot all about this. It's a nice little treat for me.
We had a new one this week, yes.
Yeah.
Last week we started reading the review from, who was this from? MJ Vote 85, if that is your real name.
Oh, Vote.
Yeah. The subject was The Patient Gamer's Ultimate Podcast. I can't decide if it's more fun to hear Tim and Brett discuss a classic game like the back of your hand, or to discover a new favorite as you play along with their book club style discussions. Fun, wholesome conversations abound, and great community engagement, including singing reviews. And this is to the tune of Paranoid Android by Radiohead. Not Moby.
Not
Moby. I've learned. So I've listened to the song a couple of times. I'm going to do my best. He has a distinctive voice.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. All right, here we go. It's going to be weird without all the guitar because there's a lot of space in this song. And in fact, he skips ahead a couple of times. So I'm not exactly sure where it's supposed to match up in a couple of places, but
just do your best.
I'm just doing my best. All right, here we go. Please, can you stop that noise? I'm trying to hear the cast about modern takes on some great games from the past with Brett and Tim. This part I'm really not sure about. I can't even remember the melody that I was thinking it was. Okay. A podcast that won't cost you any money. Discussions both informative and funny. You should be listening. You should be listening. If you like games, then tune into Dev Game Club. That last part is totally wrong. So
no, in the middle there was
right.
good. In the middle there, you even had, I think, a minor notes in there or something.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not getting the first one. I'm trying to hear the cast. That one, the way he sings that, I just could not.
Dude, it's one. Dude. He couldn't have chosen one of a more difficult person to emulate. Yeah. I love Radiohead. I love them, but yeah. I like, oof. Yeah, you did.
That is one of the stranger videos I've ever seen too, I will say.
Oh, I don't know if I've seen that particular video.
It's animated. I looked it up. It's animated by his last name's Carlson, like Magnus Carlson, I think his name is. It's this character Robin, this kid with a purple hat, who I guess he did a bunch of cartoons with prior to this, and I guess that's why that Radiohead chose him, because he would do something weird, and it is out there.
Yeah.
It is very, very strange. Anyway, thank you for that.
Well done.
MJ
well
Vote
done.
85. Again, if that's your real name. And you can shoot us those on your favorite podcast app. I'm signed up to all the iTunes feeds for our podcast, and so it's easiest for me to discover them there. But if you do have a different player that you use, you can just kind of tell me where to find that review through email, which you can shoot to devgameclub@gmail.com, where Tim here has the first one.
I do. Subject is Player's Guides from John. Hey guys, my question for y'all today is, have you ever used the formerly seemingly ubiquitous Player's Guides while playing a game? I fondly remember working my way through Mist and Riven with the help of the official strategy guides that came with my PC copies back in the day. The games were way too obtuse for my 8-year-old brain without them, and I instead remember treating them more like interactive novels while reading through the guides. Am I alone in doing this? Thanks for the great podcast, John, formerly of Cincinnati, now of Houston. It's funny. For some reason, this is such a funny question to me because it's, and I guess 8-year-old brain. Yeah, I don't know,
right.
An 8-year-old brain playing that, but that's the clue for me in there. I was like, because the fact that he's even asking this question of us is just hilarious. Because of course we use guides.
I've never actually used like a player guide that you had to buy because GameFAQs was a thing or whatever. But
even before that though, GameFAQs wasn't a thing forever, right? You didn't use it before that?
No, I didn't.
Oh, I did. Totally.
No, I never did. The only thing I ever did once was trying to beat the Wizard and the Princess. I called the line.
Oh, yeah. Line. Right. I think you maybe told that story.
I think I mentioned that when we did Space Quest and King's Quest, and I was terrified that my parents were going to read me the riot act about an 800 call or 900 call or whatever.
Yeah.
They probably thought it was something healthier for a young brain like porn. So who knows what they thought I was doing. I only ever did it the once. I always just played my games, working them out for myself.
Wow, that's admirable. Yeah, I think I'm trying to think of some of the ones. Like what I would often do is get them not necessarily like John was saying, where he would play through them like a interactive novel, sort of like page by page and kind of playing through that way. I would usually get them for like stats heavy games where I wanted, especially RPGs, where I wanted to know all of the stuff that's possible. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
Like maybe even like the early, I don't know, Baldur's Gate 1 or something like that in the early days. Even though there was an internet, I still would, there's one I'm trying to think of. It might have been, even though I didn't.
2
was early Fallout. In fact, Fallout 1 might have actually come with the guide in the box because I think I had that. Some of the Metal Gear games, actually, I think I got them to almost just to read more about Metal Gear.
Yeah.
Not necessarily because I was stuck, but
John definitely wasn't the only one. I mean, somebody actually on the stream mentioned also not being able to play Riven, which I've been playing. Well, which I finished yesterday on the stream.
Oh, congratulations!
Thank you very much. That's a game. That's It is a very different style from Myst in a way. And in some ways, yes, some ways no. There's way more like,
Huh.
you know how the whole island sort of is a puzzle.
Uh-huh.
It's that through the whole thing is like everything's connected, and
That
so
sounds
things.
cool.
It is very cool, but it's when you're used to like the more self-contained puzzles of Myst.
Oh,
It feels a little different, or even Abduction doesn't really feel quite like that. Abduction is actually a nice really sits well in between them, I think.
that's
But it
what I
had
was
some
gonna,
of the it had some of the same feelings to me, as I mentioned with Abduction or Myst, of just like having theories. Like in this case, it was more I had to keep a note of like running mysteries, like what is this object about, and I would just keep a list. And then when I was stuck, I'd just go to the list and be like, okay, well, what have I got that I haven't figured out yet? And can I make any connections of stuff that I've learned since or whatever?
Mhm.
So it's really neat.
Yeah.
Anyway, somebody on the stream mentioned the Riven book in particular as being almost written like a novel in the sense that it was sort of describing this player who came to the island and did these things.
Oh, wow.
And so it was written in a much more, appropriately, a much more literary kind of style than you normally got with those books.
Yeah.
Normally they are, sometimes they are, I guess, more than others. But, there's often just like the maps and make sure you pick up this and go from here to here. And this is the shortest way or whatever. And there's a lot of kind of inside baseball type stuff to make you efficient or whatever. But I really appreciated that approach. The Infocom books, the Infocom games had them, but I didn't get them until much later. And what I appreciate about them is there were sort of levels of questions.
Mm-hmm.
You could get a question.
Sierra did that too,
right? Where it would like kind of spell it out more for you the deeper you went into the question. You'd be like, what's the deal with the mailbox? And the first one would say, well, what's in mailboxes, right? So it would be kind of trying to do a Socratic method deal with you. And I always appreciated those as well. Yeah. Like they were trying to prod you to think. Yeah, I appreciate that aspect to those sorts of things.
Well,
but definitely not alone.
No, not alone. And to your point about like, it's really interesting to hear the Riven one. I wonder if Robin was involved with that one, because he wrote the book or the novel, right?
Right. They each wrote one, and there was a third that was written by David Attenborough, I think, wrote the third one.
But oftentimes,
from the library, I have the Book of Atris right now.
Oftentimes, developers were fairly involved with the creation of these strategy guides too. I know we were. We would often hire Prima or something, right? But then we would work heavily with them and even provide assets and stuff for some of the games back in the day. But I have to admit, to John's question, I kind of miss them to some degree because it was a whole sub-industry that the kids out there listening probably have no idea existed. Because the internet.
Although I have one for Skyrim that I'm happy to send to somebody.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I'm sure they're still published, and I know they are, right? And Nintendo actually, what they've kind of moved to is almost like premium books, where they've gone to more of a high end rather than volume. They make really nice books. Like Dark Horse actually started publishing books, and they do a nice like the lore of Witcher, the world of the Witcher, which I bought, which is a really nice book. So not necessarily a strategy guide, but they're kind of going into that side of it. But I do miss them because I think different companies had different strategies, no pun intended, for how they would create them. As Brett said, they would be written differently, or they'd have the different sort of stance. And it just was another sort of product around video gaming that had some creativity thrown into it, which I always appreciated. So the nicer ones, are definitely missed.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I still have Starfighter and Jedi Starfighter and Republic Commando, I think, here. I can't see it. But
I wonder if I still have. I might have gotten rid of them, but yeah.
Yeah, I held on to those. They don't take up a ton of space compared to some of my other stuff. Considering how many video game boxes I have in my basement, it's I feel too bad about keeping 3 strategy guides for games I worked on.
Totally.
I also have like Fallout 3 and Skyrim, so most of my games. All right, I have the second one here. It's from the Second Quest. Remist and Disney, he says. Hey guys, In the most recent discussion on the pod, you half-jokingly brought up the idea of a Disney Mist Island in terms of seeing the world realized. Well, as it turns out, in the 90s, there actually were real plans to convert the undervisited Discovery Island at Disney World into Mist Island. It never got past the Imagineering stage, unfortunately, but a neat bit of trivia that further illustrates Mist's reach during that era. And then he has a /film.com link, which I will put in the show notes. Second Quest also followed up with a quick note. If your intent with the next series is to explore the other half of the Metroidvania genre, while Castlevania IV is a great action platforming game, the backtracking and exploration elements that coined the Metroidvania moniker weren't introduced to the series until a couple of games later in Symphony of Night on the PSX. Yeah, that's something we addressed, but I appreciated having the email because it led us to discuss it and decide to continue forward with this one, because I think there is value in seeing, even just contrasting this with Super Metroid. Because Nintendo was definitely ahead of the curve. We'll probably do more of that in future episodes.
Well, we'll have to consider Symphony of the Night at some point anyway, right?
Yeah, probably.
So, because if that is the case, especially because it's on PSX, just to contrast, we do that sometimes with the 2D version and the 3D version.
Yeah.
So, or I guess that's Symphony of the Night is still 2D, right?
Yes. Yeah. But how about that with the Mist Island?
Oh my goodness! So yeah, I mean, I think that I've done a little bit of consulting for Imagineering in the past, and I need to reach out to some of my contacts there and see if they know anything about that. That is blowing my mind. That's
pretty wild.
That is crazy to me.
Because we know, like, Jonathan Ackley went there.
Yeah, Jonathan's there, and
after Curse of Monkey Island, and it makes you think, like,
Chris Pavis was there. He's no longer there. Yeah. Rob Huebner's there now. He took over for Chris, actually. Yeah, but I did a little bit of consulting for them on Star Wars Land stuff. So,
neat. And that just opened, right?
Yeah,
or is just opening. I know there's previews recently.
It opened in Anaheim. It's not open in Florida yet.
Oh, okay. They're doing it in Florida as well. Okay. Well, neat.
Yeah,
neat. Well, I probably won't get to it, but that's very cool. That is very cool. And a Mist one would have been... Oh,
that would have been amazing.
That would have been pretty intense. I bet they could have done some really interesting stuff. Can
you imagine? I mean, the whole, like, the ship rising from the water, like, in real life.
Oh, yeah. Man. That would have been wild. I mean, and Riven actually is even better. I mean, Riven are much more effectively connected just one world. You do link to other places, but it's kind of really more about this one location, and there's more sort of story stuff that's more direct. There are actors that you interact with, not talk to, but like that they come and take stuff from you, and you're watching them talk and stuff. So it's another interesting solution to the FMV approach that we talked about in terms of abduction. It's a fascinating game. I loved playing it, and now I'm playing Myst 3. So
are you really?
You go. Yep.
Is that Exile? Is that what?
That is Exile, yes. And it was done by the Journeyman Project folks, which was Presto. Presto Games or Presto Studios, I don't recall, under Ubisoft. And so it definitely has a different feel. It has full degree of motion to look, but you still click around the environment to move. So it's interesting, having complained about how sometimes you're not seeing the right stuff. I now wish I was back in the Riven world in some ways, because I'm sometimes not sure if I've looked in the right direction.
Because it used to force you to look at what they want.
Right, exactly. Because it used to be you knew that you were going to see you might not be happy with the view of what you're getting, and that was really the complaint I had, which is like, I can't quite follow where pipes are going or something like that, but you can work it out. Whereas now here I'm like, have I seen everything? And it's also a little it's not super smooth either, because it's a little, it's this engine is stretching, I think, at the time that anyway.
Is it still HyperCard though?
No, it's not. No, it's not. No, I'm not sure what the engine was. It is not it must have been some internal thing, and because it's being emulated in some offshoot of Scum VM, I think. I haven't really dug into that. It's called Residual VM, I think is what it's called. Yeah, it's a whole thing. Anyway.
Yeah, interesting. That's great. Great tidbit. Thanks. Want me to go on the third one?
Yeah, let's go on to the last one.
Okay. Subject, Mew Hunt from Gothic Chocobo. All right. Good old Gothic Chocobo.
Mm-hmm.
More fun with Mew. Hey, DGC, just a little addition to the Mew under the truck in Pokemon Red, Blue, Yellow. It wasn't just a case of, quote, you had to come back later when you had Surf, unquote, because once you had received the HM cut from the captain and exited the ship, it sailed away and you could not get back to that screen with the truck. The trick was you had to fight nearly all of the trainers on the ship, and then after getting the HM from the captain, you had to have your Pokemon faint in a battle on the ship so that you would be transported back to the Poke Center. This would mean that the ship would not depart, and you could still go back later when you had Surf and inspect the truck. Mew is said to have the DNA. He goes on.
Yep.
Mew is said to have the DNA from every single Pokemon within its body, and its DNA was cloned and altered to create Mewtwo, which is, or at least was at the time, the most powerful Pokemon. I would have tweeted this at you, but it's a touch too long for Twitter. Many thanks, Gothic Chocobo, and many thanks to you, Gothic Chocobo.
Indeed, yes. I heard this alluded to, and I knew it wasn't entirely right when we talked about it, but I couldn't remember because this doesn't. It's not something I tried or had playground conversation about or whatever.
That's got to be the most elaborate one of these urban video game myths of all time. Like that's. Now that he's added that extra color to it, I just cannot believe that that's what you had to do.
That's pretty good. I like the trick where that you have to have the Pokemon faint in a battle so they get teleported back to the Poke Center, and so it doesn't leave. That's kind of neat. That
Kotaku article must have walked through this. We just neither of us.
Neither of us went and read it. Yeah, I want to note too. Gothic comes by my streams all the time. He's in I believe in England, and apologies if I get that wrong, but I think so. And he has actually just recently started streaming all kinds of Pokemon stuff, and he's one of those folks who was in watching me play and is quite knowledgeable, along with a couple others like Irreverent Q on the stream. Very knowledgeable about Pokemon.
Knows the stuff.
And he has started streaming at twitch.tv/ I believe just Gothic Chocobo. So GOTHICCHOCOBO. I think he streams in the mornings his time a few times a week. So you'd have to go and kind of figure out how that works for you or if it works for you. But
cool.
I'm sure to be a lot of fun because he certainly knows his Pokemon. Oh boy.
I have to say, watching all the coverage of Sword and Shield has gotten me interested.
Oh, here you go. You're on the train.
That thing looks amazing. I have to say, like all of the different. So they've added in. So they've kept the Let's Go Pokemon style of the Pokemon are just running around in the in
the world, right?
In the world, and they had sort of a sneaking up mechanic. So they kind of have a bit of the old school, like hidden in there as a sub mechanic, but just it's basically kind of open world looking, and you're wandering around with a third person camera, kind of like Let's Go Pokemon. So I don't know, it looks epic.
And the visuals are fantastic. It's an Unreal Engine 4 game, I believe.
Is it really?
That's what I've been given to understand, which is interesting in and of itself to see more of that happening in Japan, because that has not historically been a thing. That they use other people's engines. They usually just code everything from scratch. But I think that's finally getting to be too much for them to manage. The expectations are just so high for graphic fidelity and things like that. But
Yeah, a lot of Japanese development is using Unreal these days.
Yep. Yep.
More and more than you'd realize.
Yeah, almost certainly more than you'd realize. Yeah, so it's super interesting. It's I mean, that's the Pokemon company and not strictly Nintendo, but they're part of that partnership. So it's
Yeah,
super interesting to see.
Game Freak. Yeah,
Yep. Yeah, Game Freak.
yeah. Well, cool. Those some good mails. Thanks for sending them in.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks for sending those to, as I said earlier, devgameclub@gmail.com. We'd love hearing from you, either to correct or clarify, or to ask questions and give your own thoughts. We appreciate all of that. Sometimes we get to the nostalgia too, and that's always very fun. So it's really runs the gamut. We appreciate every mail. Okay, so for next time, you were suggesting we do like 3 more levels, I think is what you
Yeah,
floated.
amp it up a little bit maybe and see how that goes. We're still kind of unsure on the difficulty, like how it's going to ramp up, and Brett's going to be traveling and stuff. So we thought maybe keep it a little bit light, but not do a little bit more than last time. So
Yeah. I'm going to have a pretty short window of getting back and playing when I get back. I'm not taking a computer with me, so
good for you.
I will not have access to any video games. I mean, I need to get away from the screens for a few days, to get to different screens, I should say. I'm going to a film festival. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that a lot, but it will mean a short amount of time when I get back. But we'll play the next three stages, and hopefully I can get through that, and we'll record right when I get back.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. In the meantime, you can find the podcast at Dev Game Club on Twitter, where you can also find my co-host at
Tim Longo Jr. with the JR at the end.
I mostly stream these days via twitch.tv/Brett Duville. No underscore in there. But, of course, I won't be doing that this week. When I come back, I will be doing more of Myst 3, so you can look forward to that. And then I might get back to Lightning Returns, or I might just still be in for the ride and just keep playing them. We'll see how it goes. That has really scratched an itch.
Personally, I want you to get back to Kingdom Hearts.
I've also been playing Kingdom Hearts, so
because I want to hear more about
that's not gone, but it has slowed. Right. So I'll try to pick that up for you. I know you like those updates. All right, thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy playing games this week, and good night.
Good night.